Polygon Art is a studio that no doubt doesn't have the greatest reputation on the market. They're most known for their FPS series such as United Assault, Strike Force, as well as the subject of today's video, Beyond Enemy Lines. Most of Polygon Art's games have been heavily criticized over the years by YouTubers such as Big Fry TV. Their latest game, Strike Force 3, even reaching more mainstream reviewers, receiving rather unfavorable receptions there as well. But I think their upcoming game, Beyond Enemy Lines Vietnam, gives me a perfect opportunity to talk about them. Because, unlike most other YouTubers, I actually see a great bit of potential with the studio and the works that they are producing. But before we get into any of the controversy, let's first talk about the game itself. Now, what is Beyond Enemy Lines Vietnam? Well, it's described itself as a tactical first-person shooter that's unsurprisingly set in the Vietnam War. The game advertises giving the players complete freedom in terms of how they want to tackle each objective, offering you the choices of going in all guns blazing or stealthily picking off your targets one by one. The game is also supposed to feature multiple vehicles that you can drive, including a whole ass helicopter. The trailer also shows off a crisis-style system that allows you to change your weapon attachments on the go, which is a feature that I've personally always really enjoyed in video games. Now, this all sounds very well and good, so why aren't more people hyped about this game? Well, it comes down to the aforementioned controversy behind its developers. There have been a lot of criticisms thrown at Polygon Art over the years, some of which are more warranted than others. I'll start by going over some criticisms that I personally think are warranted and that I would more or less agree with, and then I'll try to reel it back in and try to explain why I personally still back this studio and the works that they are creating. I think the number one thing that these games suffer from is being overly ambitious. They often focus on a large scale rather than a small one, which, when you're making a small indie studio, is always a bad move. All of their games are filled with very cool features and ideas, but due to what I assume is a lack of budget, a lot of the times they don't quite manage to stitch it all together into the vision that they have for what they want the game to be. Now, personally, I am very good at looking past flaws in games and see them for what they're trying to be, but your average consumer, they're not gonna be nearly as forgiving as I am, which is inevitably going to lead to all the bad reviews. Another issue comes in the form of the price tag. A lot of their games sits in the 15 to 20 euro range, even going up to 30 euro in some cases. Now, I fully understand the need to make money. After all, this is a small self-publishing studio, but there is no doubt that the price tag will turn many people away. If your game is 20 to 30 euro, you will be compared to other games that cost 20 to 30 euro. And if we think about, for example, 0 Hour that we talked about the other day, that game is only 10 euro, so comparing these two, it's not gonna be looking good for the Polygon Art games. Now, we can obviously argue about whether that is fair or not, but it's not gonna change the situation that this is in fact going to be the case. Another thing that is sort of related to the money situation is the frequency of which they release their games. During the past couple of years, Polygon Art has been cranking out a lot of games. And while I, on one hand, can really appreciate the work ethic that they are putting in, the issue that ends up coming from that is that when you make your games so close together and give them so little development in between, it ends up leaving you very little room for improvements between each games, and it's gonna make your game sort of appear more like shovelware that you are just cranking out to make a bit of money, rather than you actually improving and trying to make a good product. Now that's not to say that the Polygon Arts games haven't improved over the years, they definitely have. On their YouTube channel we can see a video, for example, where they do showcase the sort of progression in Beyond Enemy Lines between the different games that they've made. And there is certainly improvements that they have made, going over from using asset packs to actually animating everything themselves. But again, once there definitely are steps and improvements that are made, it is very, very little between each game, which is definitely going to look really bad in the eyes of a lot of people. Now, I can definitely understand why they need to release as many games as they do. Again, it comes down to the money situation. They are a self-publishing studio and their games are still like rather small. It's not like they can just release one game and live off of the income from that for the next couple of years while their next game is in development. And at the very least, I much more appreciate them actually turning out new titles and making new products rather than adding a bunch of microtransactions or begging for GoFundMe money in an attempt to milk the small player base that they have. So it's definitely understandable and in some ways even respectable, but the general public isn't going to look at it that way. They're going to see a company release the same budget FPS game again and again, and that's going to look really bad in the eyes of a lot of people. So why am I so keen on defending these guys? Well, it's because I actually think Polygon Art is one of the very few developers that are actually trying and want to make good games for people to enjoy. They are very much a victim of their own ambitions, and it is something that they will need to work on. But at the core, they do genuinely seem well-meaning. And a lot of their games, especially Beyond Enemy Lines 1 and 2, are genuinely fun for what they are. And looking at their first FPS games compared to where they are today, they have definitely learned and improved a lot. And Beyond Enemy Lines does look legitimately good, and I am honestly excited for it. In a market where there are so many asset flippers and sketchy developers, I think it's unfair and sad that these guys get grouped in there. Sure, their games can be a bit overambitious and overpriced, but I think Polygon Art really are genuinely passionate developers that want to create good games for people to enjoy. And the fact that they keep trying again and again despite the backlash really shows a level of dedication that should be commended. If any of the developers manages to stumble upon this video somehow, I want to thank you for the entertainment that you've provided me. I see what you're doing and I think it's good. Just keep going and keep improving, and I wish you all the best of luck for the future. And I'll be looking forward to covering the full release of Beyond Enemy Lines Vietnam.